Speaking of British and American who think they should be meddling in the region, you posted this clip of well, two very bright gentlemen, as I'm putting it very mildly.
Oh God, I know.
Yes,
what you're
you know.
talking about already. Here we go.
You already know which clip. I'm gonna play this. God, it's actually only 2 minutes, but there's like so much. There's so much crap inside of it. I think we have to pause it multiple times. So
yeah.
So I'm gonna play it and we'll go through it. We're gonna dissect this because
okay.
Wow, just wow.
I mean, you're right. There is a problematic brand of so-called anti-imperialism, which will only zone in on atrocities committed directly by Western imperialism.
I'm going to be honest with you.
Okay, I'm going to stop you right there. What? Maybe it's because Western countries are the ones occupying other countries. They're the colonizers. So, like, naturally, if you have French occupying Syria and Lebanon, or they're occupying North Africa, you have British in North Africa and all over Africa and in the Middle East, then obviously, because they are the occupiers, you would talk about Western atrocities because the West is the one occupying these countries. I mean, what kind of stupid, what is that? What do you make of that, honestly?
I make of, it's like somebody who's trying to attack the people that are the loudest against imperialism. Like, I can only see that as a defensive imperialism. You live in the UK. Like, you live in the UK in the comfort of probably like 24-hour electricity and lots of luxury around you. And you know where that luxury comes from, by the way? You know where that infrastructure and the wealth comes from? You stole it.
Yeah.
You come from you live in a country that is built off of theft and looting of other places in the world, the rape and pillaging of the rest of the world. That is the only reason that these Western countries have any wealth whatsoever, is because of literally stealing people, not just materials, by the way, actual humans and turning them into slaves.
Yeah. And this is the problem. Like, I'm telling you, as a British citizen, I know how the British think, and they still have this kind of nostalgia about the empire. They think it was some kind of like grand humanitarian project. Like, oh, it's so racist. They don't. It's fully indoctrinated. They're fully indoctrinated with it. They don't even realize, like, oh, we went and civilized the rest of the world. We went and gave them railway roads. Fuck your railway roads. You stole their shit. You stole their resources, their people, their futures. What is that? And then they're hurting us. They're attacking Western imperialism. Yes, because you're the largest perpetrators of it.
Yeah. It's also funny too, because when they talk about civilizing the rest of the world, there's actually like testimony from Native Americans about the settlers who came to the US, and they complained that the settlers didn't shower. They didn't bathe because they thought bathing was like immodest.
Yeah, some weird, I don't even know what it was, man. The French king would bathe and it would be like a royal event. Like, oh my God, he's taking a shower. Like,
but that's actually one of the reasons the plague would like spread as much as it did across like medieval Europe, because they thought bathing was like bad for you. My point is to say, like, who's talking? It was civilized. You just had bigger weapons. That's all you had, advanced weapons, and that's why you were able to dominate the world. And your crazy, like, fanatical messianic ideology. That is why these people were able to dominate the world. But beyond that, what he said too is like, you're living in the place committing atrocities. Why wouldn't that be the first thing that you denounce? Like, if your country's committing atrocities, why would you waste your time talking about whatever atrocities somebody else is committing who's under your boot? Like, I don't understand that mentality.
I don't either. Let me play the rest of it. I'm going to let him finish because, again, it's very hard when you hear so much crap. But I'll try my best.
Triggering.
You're right. There is a problematic brand of so-called anti-imperialism, which will only zone in on atrocities committed directly by Western imperialism.
I'm going to be honest with you.
I agree, but you're right. But there's a nuance, isn't there, of kind of,
Oh, there is nuance. I'm just completely black-pilled on the legions of online anti-imperialist leftists because I found almost all of them are Assad defenders, which I have no respect for. Having recently encountered them and realized the extent of their conspiracism, a lot of them by anti-imperialist, what they actually mean is that they're anti-American, and not in the cool way, by the way.
The cool way, not in the cool way.
Yes, you're damn right. We're anti-American. What the fuck?
Yeah.
Oh my God. Okay, first of all, what is this Assadist nonsense? Like, as if, you know, you can't be anti-imperialist in Venezuela, right? You have to be a supporter of Assad. You can't be anti-imperialist in Cuba or Lebanon. No, these are all Assad supporters, right?
I mean, this guy calls anyone who opposes the U.S. war on Syria an Assadist. That's his definition. Like, that's why he's calling. So in that case, if that's your definition of an Assad supporter or an Assad defender, is somebody who's like, I don't want America to fund a bunch of death squads and bomb Syria, then, like, I guess, yeah, he's right. Then any anti-imperialist would qualify as an Assad defender because they would be opposed to that. But that's what he's saying when he says that.
Yeah. No, but you don't understand, Rania. He's so black-pilled. You know, he's on another plane of existence and intelligence.
We
cannot
think
comprehend.
He's just so smart. Who is this guy? Okay,
I have no clue. I think there's really something to be said about white people from the UK and the United States talking about Arab countries they don't understand. It's like, it's almost as if they're like walking in the footsteps of the people committing the imperialism, right? It's like, you know, we're gonna go and meddle in countries we have no fucking business being in. Well done. Good job. They
are like, I just don't understand. I didn't hear about this guy, the one who was just talking, until like 2 weeks ago. I didn't know who he was. And I looked on his YouTube page. I'm like, this guy has like hundreds of thousands of YouTube subscribers, and everyone's calling him like the voice of the left. And I'm just like, what even qualifies him to be talking about any of these places? Like, what are your credentials to be pontificating in such an arrogant and the most arrogant like voice and attitude that he has, where he's like, oh, well, you know, I just think that Syria and Assad defenders and anti-imperialists, and like, go fuck yourself.
No, but
I
this
just
is
can't
incredible.
even deal with that.
It's incredible. You know, people who have never set foot in the Middle East pretending to understand the Middle East better, and I love how they reduce anyone who's fighting, you know, against ISIS, against the United States occupation, the British occupation.
Assad.
Yeah, Assad, like they have no clue about the political, racial, ethnic diversity in the Middle East, never mind in Syria. They have literally no clue. I mean, this just shows that they have no clue what they're talking about.
Oh, yeah.
And, you know, it's just incredible that people think these are foreign policy experts. Like, you know, if it's something to do with, I don't know, because, you know, they call themselves leftists, I guess, at least the guy here does, you know. That's one thing, but you want to come and pretend to understand Syria. Dude, there are Syrians who don't even understand Syria. What the fuck makes you qualified? Like,
yeah, because what qualifies him is that he was born in America. And by sheer characteristic of his white American or Britishness, he is automatically qualified to pontificate on literally any place in the world, particularly the third world, which can benefit from his extreme wisdom. That's like the attitude of these people.
Okay, let's continue.
Anti-American in the way that I think that America, the institution, the nation, has failed its people. There are ways we could use our wealth and power. We are not. We're using them poorly. We're using them to hurt people. I'm anti-American because I want America to be better. They're anti-American because they've just found other countries to defend. Mostly, it seems, Russia.
What?
That's the dumbest thing I've ever heard.
Set of geopolitical power interests. And, well, if that's the case, then your criticisms are illegitimate, because at that point, it's just team sports. It's not a real substantive left.
So basically, he can't make his mind up. Like, he just said that people who are anti-imperialists are Assadists, and now they're also Russian? Like,
yeah.
I'm really confused.
Well, he's saying that people are anti-imperialists because they want Team Russia to win. Like, we see it as like a sport.
Oh yeah, totally.
Which is funny because it's actually like how people, like how imperialists see it. They see it as a sport where they want to win everything. And it's like, no, I'm opposed to American imperialism because it's destroying the world. It's literally destroying the climate. It's making the world unlivable. I'm not opposed to American imperialism because I love Russia. Like, he's actually saying that. He's actually saying we just like China and Russia more. And we want them to win.
This concept of get the fuck off our land and go home does not enter their brains. Like, they don't even consider Syrians and Lebanese and other people in the global south human beings. Like it's impossible for us to even demand that you leave our fucking country. You're invaders. You're foreign fucking invaders killing us,
you're just an
robbing us.
You're just an Assad defender. You're just
like that.
Assad.
Apparently, that's being an Assadist. Apparently, that's loving Russia, wanting foreign invaders to leave your country, right? And then, of course, I know what the response is here to say, well, Russia and Iran are occupying Syria. No, Russia and Iran were invited to Syria to deal with the scourge of ISIS, which was created by the United States and its allies. And if you don't know that, you have no fucking business discussing history or the Middle East or Syria.
Had Russia not gone into Syria, I mean, you could be talking about ISIS taking over, or Nusra at least taking over Damascus, Al-Qaeda taking over Damascus.
They were 5 minutes. They were 5 minutes away from my cousin's house. That's how close they were, man. In central Damascus. They would be killing everyone. I got
in Aleppo, these people celebrated. They talk about us celebrating or us defending war criminals or war crimes. These people called it liberation when Aleppo was invaded by armed people, not from Aleppo, armed people from the countryside, invaded Aleppo and like looted people's homes and pushed out the state. And they called that liberation. And then imposed a weird little Saudi like Islamist theocracy on Aleppo, on the areas of Aleppo they controlled, and then put parts of Aleppo under siege. Like they split the city in two. Aleppo wasn't even a part of the initial uprisings. Like it was a quiet place that remained relatively stable until 2012. And these people think that Aleppo was being liberated by outside forces coming in with weapons and terrorizing the people who live there. Like, I can't even take anything you say seriously. Like, by his own logic, the guy who was talking, by Vaush's own logic, if we're Assad defenders, well, then what does that make him? An Al-Qaeda defender? Because, pretty much. But by your own logic, like, if you're going to be that black and white about it, which I definitely don't think it's that black and white, if you're going to call anyone who was opposed to U.S. arming these death squads in Syria, these Al-Qaeda death squads, they're all Assad defenders. The Syrian soldiers fighting ISIS with an existential threat that was beheading people, those are Assad defenders, then what the fuck are you? Yeah. No, but you know, in some instances, it is that black and white, because in areas in Damascus, never mind in other places which were completely entirely taken over by al-Nusra or Daesh, it was a matter of, you know, do I stay here under the government area, or do I go 500 meters and then I'm in you know, an area where they're going to chop my head off for being Christian or being any other, even other Sunnis, like, who are not following their brand or whatever it was, or doing whatever they want because they're tyrants. It's nothing to do with religion. It's just a cover. They would be beheaded. They would be killed. They would be, like, you know, murdered in the most brutal fashions. It was black and white for a lot of people, you know. But I totally agree with what your sentiment, with what you're saying, is that they're reducing the entire concept of get off our land, stop sending these death squads into our country as, oh, you're aligning yourself with Russia. And what is that? Then you're aligning yourself with them, by your own conclusion, right? Yeah. I mean, these people, like, I could imagine these people during World War II, would they have been like, oh, you're a Stalinist because you support the USSR fighting Nazis. Like, that would have been the attitude of these people. Like, I swear. You just like the, I mean, I don't know how else to the only way I can imagine people think the way that those people think is they just don't understand the situation. They have no interest in understanding the situation. They just want to trash leftists. Yeah, like that's all they want to do. That purpose of that entire conversation was just to trash the anti-imperialist left, nothing more, to smear the anti-imperialist left. And if you're doing that, I have to question what your motivation is. Do you, like, I don't know, who are you doing that on behalf of? Do you really believe that? Like, I don't know.
This critique of America, it's just you fall in line with a different, and in this case, probably further to the right, set of geopolitical interests, which is deeply, deeply disappointing. Anti-imperialism is simple in concept, but complicated in action. Was it anti-imperialist for America to pull its troops out of eastern Syria and leave the Rajavan population to their own?
Oh my God.
Okay, my goodness gracious. First of all, the United States never pulled out of eastern Syria. They pulled out of northern Syria. It would help if you actually knew the basic fucking geography of the country you're discussing, right? They pulled out of northern Syria, and they are still occupying the east with who? The Rojavans that you claim to understand so much about. The Kurds. He's talking about the Kurds. The Kurds and the Americans are still working together. And by the way, the next thing that he says, God, it's so infuriating. You have to pause it like every second to dissect the bullshit. I'm gonna repeat the sentence.
Action. Was it anti-imperialist for America to pull its troops out of eastern Syria and leave the Rajavan population to their own, knowing they would be gobbled up by Assad and by Turkey? I would consider that a pro-interventionist perspective. They were our allies, and we allowed imperialism to take place by no longer stationing our troops there. They were allies to us, and a socialist project as well, the Rajavans. They were doing something extraordinary.
Yo, look, first of all, he says they're going to be gobbled up by Assad. Literally, the first thing the Kurds did, the SDF, when the United States pulled out of northern Turkey, they went and made a deal with who? with Bashar al-Assad. They made a deal with the government to protect them from Turkey. So first of all, this guy doesn't even know the recent history of what happened. He doesn't know the geography.
It goes in, it's even better than that, Richard. It's even better than that. The YPG is the Syrian affiliate of the Turkish PKK, the Kurdish PKK in Turkey, right? The YPG exists in Syria because Assad led it as like a bulwark against Turkey. Like the YPG would not exist in Syria without the help and support of Bashar al-Assad. So let's get that straight. So who's the Assadist now, by the way? I guess the YPG is. Furthermore, the entire purpose of the YPG fighting in Syria was never to fight the regime. They never fought the regime. They never had a regime change ideology. They actually at points allied with the regime because they needed to. For them, initially, it was all about fighting ISIS because the Kurds were really threatened by ISIS, as we know. That was like one of the groups that ISIS like targeted, like that, and Shias even more, but Kurds as well, where they would actually kidnap Kurdish children and like indoctrinate them into becoming ISIS. Anyways, the point is the YPG never was opposed to the regime, never fought the regime, still isn't opposed to the regime or fighting the regime. What happened is they accepted help from the Americans, which I don't really blame them for accepting help during the fight against ISIS. I think it's completely unjustifiable that they continue to align with America now that ISIS has been defeated. I think it's completely unjustifiable, but that's just because they got some power and some territory. They don't want to give it up. And the U.S. is using that to their advantage. And that's what's happening here. There's no regime change intention and never was from the YPG. Furthermore, this is not a leftist project. Like the PKK,
it's a socialist project utopia, you know, like I can tell he's been watching too much Vice. I just know it. Yeah. Right.
Vice. I don't know. Also, like some people on the left got sucked into the propaganda because the YPG did put out some really good PR with the help of like Westerners who were like, "Ooh, we like you," but it's a cult. Okay. The PKK is a cult. It's a cult. It maybe when it started, it had some leftist influences. But it's a cult. It doesn't function. It has some interesting principles to it that, like, I think aren't bad, but it functions like a cult. The women fighters can't have sex. Like, they can't get married.
Yeah, this reminds me of the MEK in Iran, you know, or well, not in Iran anymore, but yeah.
There's a lot of similarities. The MEK is, of course, I think, like, has a really destructive ideology. I don't think the YPG is
I just meant the one aspect that you mentioned. Just the one aspect that you mentioned. They were like,
but that's not the only similarity. The MEK also started out with some leftist roots, and since then it's transformed into a cult of personality, which is very much what the PKK is. It's a cult of personality around Öcalan. And it remains that way. And also the YPG has become a cult of personality kind of around their leader, Mazloum. But the point is it's unjustifiable that they're continuing to be allied with the U.S., but it's actually even worse than that. They're allied with the U.S. They've allowed the U.S. to have a presence in northeast Syria, and they are overseeing and maintaining control over Syria's most fertile land. The land where all the wheat is grown. 70% of Syrian wheat is in the area that the YPG is controlling. And the YPG is also controlling an area where all the oil reserves are, right? Well, the oil wells are. So the Syrian government has a currency crunch right now. They can't afford to buy anything. They had their oil taken away from them, and they can't even afford to buy it back from the YPG because they don't have the hard currency, and also the YPG refuses to sell it to them, and I don't understand why. Same with the wheat reserves. So I don't understand, like, that's just not justifiable. There's nothing leftist about that to me. There's nothing leftist also about ethnic nationalism. This is an ethno-nationalist group. You want a Kurdish state? You want to like what since when does the left support that kind of stuff? Yeah, and they're not even an area that's all Kurdish. The area that they're in charge of has Arabs in it, has Assyrians in it. Yep. It's not all Kurdish. What do you do with all those other people?
Yeah, exactly. So in the two provinces, in Hasaka and Deir ez-Zor, I was just trying to pull up a map real quick of the areas you just mentioned, which is the breadbasket region in Syria, right, where all the crops and oil are grown, like you said. the majority of the population are Arab, so Kurds are not a majority there. And also, people don't understand Syria is a patchwork of various ethnic groups. So like if Kurds want a state, why don't like you know, Armenian Syrians get their own state, or like Syrian Christians get their own state, or you know,
don't give Vaush any ideas. Don't give Vaush any ideas.
No, but this just shows they have no fucking clue what they're talking about. They do not understand the country, its history, its geography, nothing.
He's calling those people Rojavans.
What is that?
Like he's calling those people where like they walk around with a Rojavan identity. Like what are you talking about?
This is so incredible. So again, for people who don't know, Rojava is the Western or you know, Western reference, as Vaush just says, or the Kurdish reference to what is Hasake, right? So Hasake is a province. It's like a state, you know, like a governorate in northeastern Syria, and that's where you have lots of oil and crops. And then underneath in Deir ez-Zor, you have also more oil and crops. And this is, the Americans are still there. So the Americans didn't pull out.
Al Amar oil field is literally occupied by American soldiers.
Yes, and Sweda, like they have all of these various oil fields under U.S. and Kurdish occupation. So they, you know, this idea that the United States shouldn't pull out. The United States shouldn't even be there. This is not their country. You have no business being there, and I don't care if they're your allies or not your allies.
The Kurds are, if the U.S. leaves, the Kurds aren't going to be gobbled up by the Syrian regime. The Kurds were actually gobbled up in Afrin by the Turks, thanks to the U.S. Like, if there's anybody that they have to be concerned about, it's Turkey. But the U.S. has no business being there. Syria has been Balkanized. It's not just northeast Syria. Northern Syria, Idlib, is under the control of Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, which is a collection of Salafi jihadist groups, the most well-known being the former Al-Qaeda affiliate, al-Nusra. This is who controls Idlib now, thanks to America. Syria is no longer Syria like it was.
So this is all over here. I don't know how well people can see that, but basically this entire area here, Hasake and Deir ez-Zor, this is all under Kurdish and American control. And Idlib that Rania is just referring to now, Idlib is over here. And this is under Turkish control and Hayat Tahrir al-Sham. And, you know, I actually didn't know this because the head of HTS, so Jolani, is not Syrian. He's actually born in Saudi Arabia. I didn't know that.
No, he is. He's Syrian. He's actually, his family is from the Golan.
His parents? Okay.
Yeah.
Forgive me,
his dad
I was wondering, why is he named after the Golan Heights, right? Okay, so I should maybe correct that, but he's born in Riyadh. So like my first impression was like, he's not even Syrian? What the fuck? Anyway.
No, he's definitely Syrian. He's definitely Syrian, and it's funny, you know, he went to Iraq to fight with the jihad in Iraq.
Yes, with Al-Qaeda,
which happened. He grew up in a secular household. He grew up in an Arab nationalist household.
Really?
Which is funny to me. Yeah, I know people who grew up in the same neighborhood as him. He grew up in Damascus. His family's initially from the Golan, but it was.
Do you know what neighborhood it is in Damascus?
He's from, I think, in Mesdi, like in like the nice neighborhood.
Yes.
Yeah.
Wow, he grew up in Mesdi. That's fucking hilarious, honestly.
Yeah. I like know people who went to school with him, and he was like, you know, like a lot of people who grew up in the era, who came of age in the era of the U.S. war on Iraq, like a lot of young men were really radicalized by that and went and fought in Iraq. And he's one of them. And he got, you know, and it's just interesting because he didn't come from an Islamist family. He didn't come from like a Muslim Brotherhood family or something. Came from a Arab nationalist family. So a very secular household. And I would say that, you know, this is kind of, his story is a story of American destruction of the region in so many ways, because this kind of like Salafi jihadi mentality, education, or media propaganda that radicalized so many youths across the region comes from where? It comes from Saudi Arabia. And the US wars in the region radicalized people even more. Like if you read the transcript of his interview, of Jolani's interview, on the PBS Frontline.
Yes.
It's so contradictory. It's so contradictory. But in the transcript, if you actually, because the interview was much longer than what they showed, it's so contradictory because his like background, the shaping of his worldview is completely wrapped up in the Israelis and the occupation and the destruction and the theft of half of the Golan, which is how his family lost what they have. But then somehow he ends up being a part of an organization that is actually supports Israel's agenda. Like, it's just sad. It's sad on so many levels. on so many levels.
No, that's incredible. I didn't know that actually I always wonder why is he called Jolani? Like he's named after the Golan Heights. Now I get it. But just so people can understand, everything in yellow over here, this is Kurdish American occupation. And as you can see, that's where the oil is. So of course the Americans are there, right? And over here in green, we're talking about Idlib. We're talking about, not just HTS, but also Turkey. And down here we have Israel that has stolen the Golan Heights since 1967. And here the Americans are there with El Tanaf and the Free Syrian Army. They have an air base. So you can see, as Rania correctly points out, Syria has been Balkanized. That is what is going on here. And, I want to ask you, Rania, again, because maybe we should spell it out. Why is it? Why is it that Syria has been Balkanized? Why have they gone after Libya, after Iraq, after Syria, and Lebanon as well, economically and politically? Like, why do they come and carve these countries up now? Not just, during Sykes-Picot, during the aftermath of World War I, but right now especially. Why do they go after these specific countries and not, like, why was there no Arab Spring in Saudi Arabia, for example, right?
Well, because it's very simple. Any country in the world, especially in the developing world, that threatens or challenges U.S. interests or tries to maintain any level of independence is targeted. That's all it is. Saddam Hussein was our friend until he wasn't, right? He was America's friend until he wasn't. And he wasn't America's friend anymore because he went rogue. Saddam Hussein was a monster. I think, in fact, it's funny. Like, it's like he makes Assad look like a gentleman. Assad, is it compared to Saddam Hussein?
It's not even close. It's not even close.
But you actually will hear people sometimes tell you, like, they hate Assad, he's a tyrant, but Saddam Hussein was a great Sunni leader. And you're like, whoa, dude, that's just some sectarian bullshit. You just don't like him because he's not Sunni. But anyway, but no, Saddam Hussein was a good friend of the Americans when he was doing their bidding against communists, against socialists, when he was doing their bidding, when it came to who got to control the oil, when he was doing their bidding, fighting Iran in the 80s, very viciously after the Iranian Revolution. That was like an American client state. And then he tried to nationalize the oil. That was a big threat. You can't go rogue. He was like death to Israel. You can't, he became a threat to Israel. That you can't go rogue like that. And then with the issue of Libya, same thing. Gaddafi maintained, as crazy as the guy might have been with his crazy speeches and his crazy attire, which Americans love to laugh at, like he maintained a level of economic independence for Libya. And Libya was a prosperous country as a result. I'm not saying it was perfect, but it had great infrastructure, great water infrastructure. It had good electricity. It had a relatively stable economy, and a functioning country, a functioning state that no longer exists anymore. Now there's like these open air slave markets. It's just a country where militias are constantly fighting each other, vying for power. It's a destroyed place. And the same goes for Syria. Syria even more so, because Syria, not only has Syria maintained a level of independence, it also hosted resistance groups that posed a direct threat to America's client states in the region and American hegemony in the region. I'm talking about groups like Hamas and Hezbollah. It was a good ally of Hezbollah, helped Hezbollah get weapons. So that's why Syria had to go. That's the problem with Syria. It's all about independent states. Of course, the US, also, like, if a state has any level of socialism in it, that's a problem, but it's more about the independence. It's more about because you don't have to be a socialist state for America to attack you. It's all about independence. And even now with Iraq, America overthrew Saddam Hussein, imposed another government on Iraq, but it's still not pro-America enough, to the point where you have these like American neocons. They now want to like regime change Iraq again.
They told us to leave.
It's constantly, it's like, no. Maybe it's now we got to like, that's what they did with Maliki, right? They were like, oh, he's like a big bad, with Saddam Hussein, he was a big evil Sunni who was like a Nazi towards Shias. And then with Maliki, it was like, he's a big evil Shia who's a Nazi towards Sunnis. Like anybody that doesn't play ball the way that America wants has to go. That's all. Right. It's that simple. And that means the destruction and complete shattering of entire countries and societies.
Yeah. And it's really they just go and highlight the worst problems that exist in the country, or the worst political traits of a certain leader, and they amplify them to a point where they make it seem like it's Germany, Nazi Germany in the 1930s or something.
Everything is the Holocaust.
And they really make it seem like it's the worst situation on earth. They're doing that with Cuba right now, right? And Again, it's just it's all just a manufactured consent for regime change, so no one starts asking questions where these billions of dollars are going, why there are body bags coming home, why people are being maimed on television, these sorts of things. And it's really, I mean, what you said about independence, that's really the crux of the issue, truly.